Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos, and it is a great pleasure to welcome you to our live session presented from Mexico, helping teachers and learners find their inner resilience. Let me introduce our presenters. First, Brad Bawtinheimer. Brad, originally from Canada, is an international speaker currently based in Mexico City. His specialties include oracy, growth mindset, and resilience. Additionally, he is the co-author of several textbooks for primary, secondary, and young adults. He is currently the senior academic consultant at Cambridge University Press, Mexico. And Ricardo Morales. Ricardo is an international speaker and teacher trainer who for the past 20 years has been actively involved in digital and online education for different private language institutions in Mexico and Latin America, training models and ESP programs for public institutions in Mexico. He is currently the Academic Services Manager at Cambridge University Press, Mexico. And now, over to you, Ricardo and Brad.
Hello, Ricardo.
Hey, hello. Thank you, Juan. Hello, Brad. How are you?
I'm great. I'm here. I'm just looking. We have about 1.8 thousand people already from all over the world. So it's great to see
That's
so many
fantastic.
different countries. I saw someone, I can't remember what country, but it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So that is dedication.
I know. Thank you. Thank you for being here, right? I mean, or get some sleeping pills. Hopefully we can help you get some good sleep after this session. Hopefully not, right? And are we ready, Brad?
We are. Well, as everyone can see, the topic today is helping teachers and learners find their inner resilience. But before we talk about how to do that, let's first of all look at what is the definition of resilience. So we have this on 2 different slides here, some very important quotes that I think that kind of summarize it. So here in the first one, you'll notice that it says here, there's some key words: the process of coping with disruptive, stressful, or challenging life events. And then what we do with that. Ricardo, when we were talking about this, we were focusing really on the I can't speak English today, disruptive, stressful, and challenging life events. I think it's obvious, but how can we relate that to what's going on in the world right now?
Well, I think coping with disruptive, stressful, or challenging is, I mean, I'm sure these words have come to many people's minds in the past 6 months. We have gone through different things. We have gone through different aspects. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about that, but that addresses very well what has been happening in the past few months, not only in, well, we were in Mexico, but this is a global thing. I think this is something that for one way or another has kind of put us all together into one single situation. Do you think?
Right, no, 100%. And I think also then that leads us to our next slide. It's not how we're handling it also, but how can we bounce back from it? Because this is one thing I think, no matter all these countries that are here today, all the teachers all over the world, no matter what time of day it is, they've all had their own experience. Even though it's a shared commonality, I mean, we're dealing with COVID, but every single person, every single country has gone through unique challenges as well. But what are we doing to bounce back from that? And that's kind of what the focus is, not only for teachers, but what skills or what things can we pass on to our students, right, Ricardo?
Right. No, actually, that's really important, because we as teachers, when we are in front of our class, whether it's remotely, from a distance, or any different setting, we can anticipate that our students are having these feelings of distress, stress sometimes as well, right? Lots of pressure, many different things are going on in their own household. So I think it's relevant that we as teachers have that vision also, and can have some strategies that we will be sharing in regards to how we can cope with this situation.
Perfect. And I think that leads us back to point number 1, is what happens when we learn to be resilient. Whenever there is one of these factors that we just talked about, we look at we look normally at 3 different stages, and we look at something that is a trauma, then we adapt, then we grow. And if we, again, we'll obviously keep using COVID as a main example for today, but this can be applied and many, many things that are happening in your life. So if you think back as to trauma, and I can use myself as a personal example here, when all of this began back in March and also in the early April, for me, it was a shock. I mean, I just remember sitting at home thinking, what is going on in the world? And I had been watching it for a couple months, but still, when I got to Mexico, where we are right now, I just was like, wow. And then being from Canada, I saw, you know, the borders were closed and they were calling Canadians to come back to Canada. And I was like, oh my goodness. And that, for me, it was like, it was a traumatic experience watching all of this from my couch inside of my apartment. It was really, really traumatic. And then what did I do after that? Well, I think as we got later into March and then into May, I started to adapt, right? So I needed to learn, how can I do my job differently? And how can I adapt different skills that I maybe already had, but wasn't applying. And then now I'm in the growing phase. And I think I'm growing on a daily basis. And I think this is really important that we can continue. And I want to continue to grow because I want to be able to look back at this part of my life and say, you know what? I actually learned something and I actually was able to grow from it. I don't know if you can relate to that, Ricardo.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And without really going back to all the stages, I think that there are lots of things that we can have as gains from this, right? It's not only everything's been really bad and miserable. No, actually, there are lots of things that we are learning, that there are lots of lessons that we take from here. And I'm sure that in the end, there will be lots of positive things. So why don't we
100%.
start talking
Perfect. Yeah.
about
So
those aspects? Yeah.
yeah, so that brings us to 12 factors that we can look at. So if we want to,
Okay.
when we look here between adapting and growth, if we want to be able to grow, we need to look at 12 factors. So here,
Okay.
these are called the internal and environmental protective factors. And some of them
Okay.
we're going to go through quickly, but then some of them we're going to go a little bit more detailed in. So I'm going to
Okay.
start with
All right.
4 here to start with. So first of all, sense of humor. We sometimes, even in normal times, we take life too seriously. And I think it's really, really important that we learn to smile a little bit more and to be able to laugh at ourselves. I mean, we all, you know, I was telling you this example yesterday. There was a time I remember when I was teaching and I walked into my classroom and I sat on the chair and it broke and I fell down and I was lying on the floor and all my students were laughing. And I had 2 choices. I can laugh with them or I could get angry at that they were laughing. And I thought it was pretty funny.
Which did you take?
Well, I
Which one
started
did you
laughing.
take?
I
Of
started
course,
laughing
right?
because I thought it was pretty funny. But that's an extreme example, obviously. But it's really important, number one, to have a sense of humor. Flexibility. We need to know, and I'm sure everyone watching will understand this, is that nowadays especially, nothing probably goes as planned. We need to be able to change on the dime quickly. Self-motivation. Sometimes it's really difficult to get when, especially if you're working at home alone, for those of you who are still doing online classes, or when you were doing online classes, for those of you countries that have already gone back to do some sort of face-to-face, motivating yourself to complete things and to be able to achieve things is important. Self-motivation, if you're going to the gym before and maybe now you're not. And then the last one here, feelings of self-worth and confidence and self-confidence. This one I'm going to go into much deeper in just a minute. So I don't want to give too much away about that one yet. So just hold off on that. And then Ricardo, you have some others here, right?
Yes, right. Another factor that would help in here is like provide service to others, like do something good for someone. You know that there are lots of people in need now. We are in need of many things as well. So why not start sharing things, being supportive, go with some people, talk to someone, right, that you haven't talked to, that someone you know that perhaps that person is suffering from this a bit stronger. It's becoming a bigger impact. Well, provide service to others, right? Now, this there's this other aspect, which is use life skills. I'm going to go a little bit deeper later on, right? But there are lots of different things that we can learn from this, and maybe using some skills would help us into this. I'm going to go back to that later on. that also relates to autonomy and independence, to become resourceful, to find things for ourselves sometimes. And I'm sure maybe this would be a very lazy generalization, but we want to eat something different from what we have been eating all these times, and say, okay, now I just want to start eating something different, but I don't know how to cook. What am I going to do? Then you start looking for some videos and for some resources and check that out. And then one way or another, you're becoming autonomous, and you're becoming independent, and you're becoming more resourceful, and also to have a positive view of personal future. And I'm sure, and this is not just to be very, very positive or extremely positive, but nice things and good things will come out of this. But there are some other aspects that we would need to address, right, Brad?
Exactly. And then there's four more, just way quickly. So first of all, capacity for and connection to learning.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of people over the last 5, 6 months, use this time to learn something new, use this time to learn something new. And I think this is important. However, I've also seen on the other side is, because I know, for example, there's many families that you're teachers and you're teaching your classes, and then you have children and your children are in classes, and then you have to take care of things around the house, etc. It's like, when are you going to find time to learn something new, right? But so when we're saying this, I think do what you can, and if you can find the time, yes, it's important that you find the time to learn something, but don't
Right.
overdo it if it's not possible. I think that's important to
Right.
mention. Yep. Continue.
No, definitely. And also to recognize and being good at something, to say like, okay, this is something I can do. This is what I can do. I can still improve. I can go further. I can try myself a little bit more. And but those create that sense of awareness that
Mhm.
there's a value in what you do. Sometimes, as you mentioned in the beginning, it was shocking, but then after the adaptation process, which adaptation is recognizing also that we are good at doing things, that we're still able to continue with our work, continue teaching, continue with our classes, helping our students achieve their goals. And so these aspects bring also that personal competence, and say like, okay, I'm a bit slightly better than how I was 4 or 5 months ago, because I'm able to do this, and I'm able to do it right. And I'm really getting good at doing some stuff. And I think we should
Perfect.
recognize that. Don't you think?
Good. No, 100%. I think that's the key, and that's actually going to be a big part of self-worth and self-confidence, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then next year, sociability, ability to be a friend, ability to form positive relationships. I think when we look at the last 5, 6 months, I mean, generally as humans, we are social creatures, right? And so, but here we are for the last 6 months saying, okay, everything we've taught you about being social goes out the door. You need to stay in your home alone and not look at people and stay a distance from them. I think when we're where we are at now in this stage, it's important that I think that we develop as many relationships and keep social as much as possible. I know personally, again, I live alone. So, I mean, these last 5, 6 months, I have been very, it's been me and my dog and I. But in the last month or two now, I've opened up a very small social circle. But it's been about making an effort, because I was alone for so long. It's just like, oh, I have to talk to someone like in person, like not on camera. That's kind of weird, right? So you need to step outside, talk to someone, because the
Right.
more we isolate ourselves, the heavier the problem, right? And I think this is really important to remember as
No,
well.
no, absolutely. And for that matter as well, I think that links perfectly well into the next one, which is self-control as
Hmm.
well, right? I'm sure that there are many times in which you would just want to go and say, okay, this is it. That's it. I'm just gonna forget about the lockdown, and I'm just gonna go and see people, and whatever will happen. But no, I think that self-control is a protective factor as well, right? Not to be impulsive, to think things twice before actioning something, to be sure that whatever we have the impulse to do is something we really want to do, that there's a positive aspect into that, and that is going to bring something good to us. So that self-control and finding the balance also helps and supports.
Fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to look at a couple of these in a little bit more detail. So we've chosen 3 that we'll do. So the first one up here, this is yours, Ricardo. So go
Right.
ahead. Yes.
Uses life skills. Well, how about, I know we as teachers are involved now in helping students develop and learning the language, right? Many of the people who are visiting us today are language teachers. But how about equipping our students to become socially responsible, for example? How about giving them that possibility of being aware of their surroundings and of other people, have these feelings of empathy as well? How about helping our students becoming collaborative? Lots of remote teaching takes place now through collaborative work. So maybe facilitating that possibility for students to become more collaborative, to be creative, to also communicative. So it's not only about teaching the language, but also about well-being and develop the students and develop the person and the citizens that they will become. So do you think that the use of life skills would help and will promote that resilience that we are looking for?
No, 100%. I think even pre-COVID, we talk a lot about all of these skills like collaboration and critical thinking and everything like that, that they can use. I remember for years I've been saying, oh, we're preparing students for a world that we don't know what will happen in the future. Well, all of a sudden this happened and it was like, poof, and I'm going to be using this for the next 10 years. Like, remember what happened during COVID? This is why these skills are so important. So yes, yeah. Okay, the next
Yeah.
one.
And okay, to have that positive view of personal future. And as we said, it's not that we think that everything will go back to life again and everything. I think when we were talking about this, you said everything will be rosy again and everything, life would be beautiful and miraculously and everything will be happy. No, but we should take a minute, right? Within all this we have been going through, step aside a little bit and say like, okay, what am I able to do now that I wasn't able to do 5 or 6 months ago as a teacher, for example? Yeah. Okay. Perhaps a few months ago, I'm sure many teachers were able to manage technology very well, but for some teachers, it was really difficult. But now they handle it better. Now they integrate that technology into their teaching practice. So that's something that it's part of the assets that we are acquiring as teachers. And that also helps us project that positive view about our personal future, that we're getting out of this or stronger with better tools, that we have the possibility of growth. So I think that we should keep that positive view. And it's not only just to say like, yeah, everything is going to be fine. Well, no, to have that balance, but to just have that positive thought in ourselves. It takes us the same effort to have a negative thought or a positive thought. So what about doing the positive thought on that end?
Okay, well then let's look at how to do that, because we have some tips on how to grow that mindset. So let's look at that. So this kind of leads into feelings of self-worth and self-confidence. Now, first of all, it doesn't matter who you are, me, Ricardo, whoever you are sitting here watching us today or tonight or in the morning, wherever you are, every single person on this planet has had low self-confidence at some point, and that's something that some of us can recover from and some of us have a lot more problems with. But this is a huge part of resilience and being able to grow, because those of us who can move past this will have more success in resilience, etc. So we're going to look at a few different ways of how we can do that. So first and foremost, we want to look at something really important, and that is the difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset. So in summary, just instead of reading the definition here, but fixed mindset basically is when you think that once something is the way it is, it will always be that way. It will never improve. So an example for languages, for example, if you think, or if your student thinks, oh, I'm not very good at English, I never will be. That's a fixed mindset. That's closed-minded. And the opposite is, okay, English is difficult, And I know it's going to take a lot of work, but if I put my mind to it, eventually I'll be able to reach that hurdle. I'll be able to go over that hill. So that would be an open mindset, open-minded. So fixed mindset, closed, growth mindset, open. And those two terms are really, really important when we look at, not only when we look at what's happening during COVID, but also in day-to-day teaching and language teaching, etc. Agree, Ricardo?
Right, because these are tools not only to cope with these times, right? It's to help people grow, to help people improve. And it's really interesting what you mentioned about the fixed mindset, because it tends to go into, let's say, negative things, but it's not only also into that, right? There are lots of things that when we articulate, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that, when we articulate our conversation with students, sometimes we tend to help them or contribute to that fixed mindset, either for positive or for negative. But I think it's interesting to see how we can help teachers and students get rid of that fixed mindset. How about
And
some examples, Brad?
yeah, so what I have up here on the screen now is kind of our internal language. And sometimes it's verbalized and sometimes it's internally. And what you'll notice in the purple, those would be phrases that are associated with a fixed mindset. And those in orange would be phrases that would be associated with a growth mindset. So for example, if I say here, it says, this is too hard. Oh, I'm doing this activity. Teacher, this is too hard. Right? That's very fixed, right? I mean, so all of a sudden you think that you'll never be able to achieve it. But instead, what we need to be able to train our students to do, and ourselves also, because we need to learn by example, is say, okay, you know what? This is difficult, but you know what? It's going to take some time and effort, but eventually I'll be able to see improvements. But that also goes on the opposite side. We're not only talking about negativity. So for example here, this is too hard, or I made a mistake, I can't do this, I have to take care of my family. Those are all kind of negative phrases. But then let's look at the top here, then, because we don't want to get pigeonholed in just thinking we are as good as we can get. So for example, when I say, I'm awesome at this. Okay, great, good, good. But what next, right? So does that mean that you can't go any higher? So it's not that you have to get rid of this language completely, but it's what you fill it in with before or after that. And so what I like to do with this particular thing here is, if you're in a physical classroom, if you can take phrases like this, adapt it depending upon the level, write a bunch of phrases down, cut them out in little pieces, and start having a conversation with your students. What's the difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset? And then have your students arrange them so they figure out, okay, well, these phrases are fixed, these phrases are growth. If you're not in a face-to-face classroom, do a digital version of it. It doesn't matter if you're physical or distance. Now, what then you want to do is you want to get everyone to buy into this. And then every single time that someone, including you as a teacher, says something that would be in a fixed mindset, everyone says, whoa, Ricardo, that was a fixed mindset. How can you change that?
Okay.
How can you say that to look as something more of a growth mindset? And so it's an ongoing conversation. This is not a solution overnight. This is important that we're talking about. None of what we're saying is going to happen overnight. You have to start now. And you have to keep working at it tomorrow, the day after, the day after, the day after. It's constant. It's really, really constant. Do you agree, Ricardo?
I know, absolutely. It's one step at a time, right? And it's not that you're going to fix everything or stop being having that fixed mindset. It's just one step at a time. And do not expect your students to be immediate, to have this immediate response and say, yes, from now on, I'm going to have this growth mindset. Teacher, thanks for freeing me into this. Absolutely not. It's one step at a time. But we need to be consistent. We need to keep this on the regular basis and then move on. And speaking of moving on, I think we should move on.
Yes. So here also, in addition to the language that students use when describing their feelings, et cetera, the language we use as teachers is also really important, right? Because we want students to think beyond just this moment. So for example, what I have here, I have things that we can say as teachers. So on the left, that would be in a fixed mindset. On the right, that would be in a growth mindset. Now, if you notice on the left, on the orange, you may think, well, what's wrong with saying you got a 10 congrats? Well, there's nothing wrong with saying you got a 10 congrats. But, and this is the big question, but what do you say next, right? So, hey,
Right.
Ricardo, you got a 10, congrats. So now that you conquered this,
Wow.
what are you going to attempt next, right? Because I
I'm gonna
want
get
to
an
push
11, right?
you're going to, whatever the case is, right? So
Yes.
it's important that when you're giving feedback to your students, don't just give them something here from the left. Give them something also from the blue column as well. So what could you do differently next time? Hey, Ricardo, what skills did you use to complete this? Because what we want students to also focus on, and this is the big importance, is we want students to focus on the progress and the process, not only the final product. The process is just as important, if not more important than the final product. So very, very important. And then we just a few general ideas here that you can do to start having this conversation with your students. So number one, if you're back in the physical classroom, a good idea, a great idea, is you can get students to do a project where they create like a poster board where everyone has to find their own motivational phrase or grit or resilience type phrase, like we can do this, or with effort, et cetera, et cetera. So every morning, as soon as students walk in, they're able to see this. Another idea that I really, really like is, let's say, for example, you have 20 students. You give each student a day of the week. So Ricardo, you're Monday, Susanna, you're Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera. And then what that student needs to do the night before, they need to find some kind of motivational phrase. And then when you begin your class, so Ricardo, if it was your day, you would say, okay, I would start my class and say, okay, Ricardo, what's our phrase of the day, right? So you put it up on the screen and everyone repeats it, et cetera. And this is also a different way of having students, because remember, growth mindset is a process. You need to continuously work at it. It's important.
All right. Okay. So you would give your students some time for some reflection to talk a little bit about that, right? So it's not just, this is the phrase of the day, let's move on. So you would do some little work on that, but it's worth investing time in it, isn't it, Brad? I mean, it's going to bring your students into a different state of mind. It's not to get rid a little bit of this fear and stress, and knowing that they can do better, and there are ways to do better. And you as a teacher, you are leading them into a state of well-being. That's very interesting.
100%.
Right. Okay. Very good.
Another thing to continue on with this is a growth mindset exit ticket. For those who are familiar, an exit ticket, normally a teacher would say, okay, give me 3 sentences in the present perfect, and write them on a piece of paper and give me that before you leave, right? That's an exit ticket, some kind of information. But that's content, but let's now change it to growth mindset. Okay, so here, for example, if I'm in a physical class, I have it on a piece of paper and I give it to my students. They have to fill it out. If I'm in a virtual class, they have to do some kind of digital document. But these are some examples of the question. Again, adapt it depending on the age or the level. Okay, adapt it. So here, for example, I would say to you, Ricardo, what was something that was difficult for you this week? Okay, so you'd have to write and you'd think what was difficult. And then you would write, okay, what did you do to overcome that? Right? So you think, okay, I did something or I didn't, I just gave up, or whatever the case may be.
All right. Yeah.
And then the final one is, what are you going to do differently next time? Or are you going to do something the same? Oops, oh, there you go. Sorry, there we go. So this is also a really important part, because especially young children, what we want to remind young children is failure is only temporary. Failure is only temporary. And if we get students to start to realize this by realizing, you know what, I was able to overcome this challenge by applying this step and this step. And then they start to learn, oh, okay, the next time something bad happens, it's not the end of the world. I will be able to overcome. What do you think, Ricardo?
No, absolutely. And I think it's important how we articulate it. I'm checking some of the people in the conversation now saying like, wow, that's something that I will be I will start using with my students, right? That put it into a frame in such a way that students realize that it's not the end of the world, that
Mm-hmm.
if they make a mistake, if they struggle with something,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's going to make them stronger as well. That's going to give them a different perspective. That's going to give them that kind of possibility of looking inside to it again and say, like, next time, this is something I'm going to do different. And I think that sums up into becoming stronger.
Yeah, 100%. And again, just to reiterate, everything we're talking about right now is not an instant solution. It's something that it's like going to the gym, Ricardo. You don't go to the gym
Yeah.
once and all of a sudden you have a perfect body and you're perfectly healthy. It's
Oh, you don't? Okay.
no, it
That's
doesn't
not
work
how it
that way.
works. Okay.
It doesn't work that way.
Oh,
So just like the gym, growth mindset and the brain is something that you have to constantly work with, etc. And then that
all
brings us
right.
into goal setting.
Okay.
Are you good at setting goals, Ricardo? Do you think?
I try, but sometimes I struggle. I think like everybody else that sometimes say like, this is my goal. I'm good at goal setting. I'm not that good at executing that goal sets. Maybe because I lack of some tools. Do you think there are some strategies that could help into
Well,
this?
I think with goal setting, I think a lot of the times we think we are setting goals correctly. But then what happens is we don't achieve those goals, and we probably are not achieving them because either A, they weren't realistic, or B, we didn't have a plan. And I think it's important that
Okay.
we have a realistic plan. So what we're going to look at now, Ricardo, is four steps to setting a goal. Okay, so number one, Ricardo, I'm going to take you through the steps, Ricardo, and I want you
All
to
right.
give me your goal. So first of all, stage one. Okay, so I want you to think of a goal that you want to achieve. For now, we're just going to say in the next week or two. Okay, because
Okay.
the world is changing a lot, etc. So your goal should be realistic, specific, challenging. For example, finish a project. You're going to do yoga for an hour. But let's think about you, Ricardo. What's something you want to achieve in the next week or two?
Uh, we're raising some rabbits now, and I want to build a fence so they
Okay.
just don't go to other properties, and that's something that I want to attain in the next couple of weeks, maybe.
Okay. So your goal is in the next how many weeks? 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, yeah,
Okay, well, let's be specific though, because we want to give a good example.
two
2 weeks or
weeks.
three?
All right, 2
2 weeks, okay.
weeks.
So 2 weeks from today, and I'm going to follow up with you, Ricardo. I'm going to follow up with you. So 2 weeks from today,
All
you
right, I'll
are
send a
going,
picture. Yeah.
you will have a completed fence. Okay, so that's stage one. Okay. Now I want you to
Okay.
imagine, 2 weeks from today, visualize victory. So it's 2 weeks. You walk outside, your fence is complete. How do you feel?
Oh, I feel really good about it. I feel like I have achieved something
Mhm.
that is really important for our plans, and it gives me that feeling that I did it well and I can do something else, right?
Okay. And what is the positive result? So now that you have the fence, what problem does it solve?
Oh, it solves the rabbit problem, right? So
Okay.
they're
Okay.
not just gonna go to other properties. Maybe they start digging holes, right? But that's a different thing, right?
Okay. That'll be the next goal. That'll be the next goal. Okay.
That's
So
bad, yes. Okay.
okay. So your goal, you're going to build a fence. You visualize victory. You feel the sense of accomplishment. Okay. You can see it. You feel it. You see it.
Yeah.
Now, let's get into what happens next. So stage number three, obstacles. Now,
Mm.
unfortunately, in the next 2 weeks, you're going to have some challenges. You're going to have some obstacles. So think about it this way. You're walking down the street and people are coming at you, but this is like your obstacles. So what's going to
Yeah.
stop you from completing your goal?
I think it has to do with time, finding the right time to do it. Yeah, because
Okay.
it's not always that I have that time. I wish I could do more. Sometimes I get engaged into other things, as many people who are in this session now.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a family, we all have a work, we all have different things to do. So time limitations perhaps would be one of the main obstacles.
Okay. Okay.
Procrastinations and so on. That's another one, right?
Okay. No, exactly. Right. Okay. So this is where we go wrong, Ricardo. And think about this every single year. Many people make resolutions, or they're going to change things, you know, and they, for example, they're going to lose weight, or they're going to stop some habit, or whatever the case may be. And then 2 weeks after they start, they throw it out the door. Why? Because they didn't make a plan, because they didn't think about the obstacles. Okay, so just like you're doing now, you're thinking about the obstacles. So what you're going to do now is you're going to make a plan. So I want you to think. Okay, so let's say, for example, tomorrow, or for the next week, your boss calls you and says, you know what, I need these extra reports done, or you have extra meetings. What are you going to do to overcome that obstacle? What are you going to do?
All right. Okay. Since one of the main problems in building the fence is time, well, and there are things related to work that I have to complete, I could start thinking about what's important and what's urgent, for example, right? And decide what can take a bit more of time. Maybe I can make better use of my time as well. Maybe I can think about perhaps getting up a bit earlier so I can finish that project, so I can complete the work that I have to do, try to expand and be a little bit more flexible in what I achieve and how I can really deliver the work that I have to do, but in the different time frames, perhaps. So maybe I can start thinking about different strategies that would help me complete that objective. What do you think? Do you think that could help me?
I think that's really good. I just think the only thing to keep in mind is not use the word maybe I can think. Instead, say, yes, I will. It's like when you ask, it's like when you, I'm sure you've asked students before and you say, oh, the student, you need to do this. And you're like, yes, teacher, I'll try. Well, try. Try is what yoga does.
All right.
I mean, what Yoda does, yeah?
So instead of maybe I can do, then I will do this, right? I will, in order to make it a plan, I will get up earlier. I will decide which.
And a specific time, not just earlier.
Right.
What time are you
1 hour earlier. All right. Okay.
Perfect.
Good.
Right.
That's
so
a good insight. Thanks
so
for that.
Again, going back, no problem. Going back, number one, think of your goal. Make sure it's realistic. Number two, visualize victory. Number three, think of your obstacles. Number four, create a plan. And just one thing about this, if you get to this stage, stage number 4, and you think there's no way to fix that obstacle, there's no way to go around that obstacle, you need to go back and reevaluate your goal, because maybe the key part of the first part was your goal needs to be realistic. Right? So if there's no possible way to overcome the time barrier, overcome this, then your goal wasn't right in the beginning. Right? And that's really, really
maybe
important.
I had to rethink about that, right?
100%, yes.
But that
100%.
doesn't mean that I have to abandon it. That means that I have to go back and revisit it. All right, okay.
100%.
Very interesting.
Very good. So those are, this is for everyone watching. This is for you personally to set goals, but this is also something you need to share with your students, right? So a lot of times at the beginning of a course or a year or a school year, we talk about language goals or study goals that we have with our students, and students just say, oh, I'm going to watch more Netflix. Okay, great. If Netflix was the answer, we wouldn't have a job, right? It's one part, but not just watching Netflix. Well, what are you going to do when you watch Netflix? I mean, how long are you going to watch Netflix? Are you going to write something down while you're watching Netflix? I mean, these are all things. You need to be as specific as possible. And that's really, really, really important. And then, Ricardo, we don't have much time left. So we have 2 final things to wrap everything up.
All right,
So this, I think this is important. You and I were speaking about this earlier, accepting negative feelings. What I don't want everyone to think about today is to think that we're saying, oh, hide all your negativity, right? This has been the most traumatic experience for many of us in our lives, and we want you to forget it. No, 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 no. We don't want that. If you need to go into your bedroom and cry for 5 minutes, go into your bedroom and cry for 5 minutes. That's okay. Because if you push all those negative feelings down, that's actually going to cause more damage in the long run. But what the purpose of today is, what can we do to try to recover from those negative feelings? What do you think about that, Ricardo?
No, absolutely. And we really need to set up a strategy for that as well, right? Like, okay, they are here, accept those negative feelings, and also think of how you could not fix, right? Because you don't fix those, but how you can channel them into something that would bring some powerful, positive vision of things as well. But keep them there. Negative feelings, it's good to have them as long as we accept them. You just don't neglect them and say like, no, they don't exist. Go on,
Exactly.
all right?
Okay, and then the final one here, reflect, relate, reinvent. This is a perfect opportunity, and I've been doing this a lot, sitting here with my dog, reflecting on my life and what's important to me. And this is the time is think about what's important to you.
Yeah,
And
okay.
now maybe it's time to reinvent yourself, right? Reinvent on what you're going to do going forward, right? Don't let this be a wasted opportunity to have that reflection, because we're in this state of mind. And I think this is a really important time. Reinvent yourself. And we are doing this. We're learning all these skills. And some of the talks already have been talking about this, is you're learning all these new skills. What are you going to do with them? That's really important. Yeah.
And we shouldn't really think of reinventing and having this 180 degrees change and think and we're going to be completely different persons starting tomorrow and after this talk. Absolutely not. It's the little things that will help us reinvent, right? See ourselves from a different perspective, think that we have different options, many things to do. We still have lots of things to do with our students. Maybe reinvent ourselves as teachers and educators and say like, okay, all this comfort zone and all these things that I've been going through will need to help me become a better teacher. And I'm sure it will help
100%.
them. I'm sure that all teachers are becoming stronger and they have a great set of new assets and skills to share with their students. We're running out of time, Brad.
Okay, well, I think we have maybe time for just a couple questions, right, Ricardo? So maybe
Yeah,
I'll just open up
definitely.
the Q&A here, or if Jose Antonio, Juan Carlos is there. I don't know if he can. Let me just let's go to the chat. Juan Carlos, are you there?
Yes, Brad.
Yeah.
There are a lot
do
of.
we have any questions that in the Q&A section that we can quickly answer? We have a couple minutes left.
Yes, there are many interesting questions. One, for example, from Ines Kilgus, we have, I think the question, why should I go out of my comfort zone, is really good. How can we get the students to be motivated for stepping out of the comfort zone?
Okay, right. I think motivation is something that comes from the inner body. We teachers, it's not that we cannot motivate them, but we can trigger that motivation. Look what students like, look what students' areas of interest are, and put them on the table, right? It's not that we're gonna push them, because motivation comes from the body itself. So how can we put these teasers for students that they feel attracted to, and they say, there's something in me for what I'm learning, and perhaps that would help them squeeze a little bit and shake a little bit and leave that comfort zone and start moving. But again, it's one step at a time. Don't you think, Brad?
100%. Imagine a pool. If you're going in a swimming pool, you don't throw someone who's learning to swim in the deep end, right? You start in the shallow end and you slowly work your way. And I think that's important. Baby steps are better than no steps. And I think that's important. Huh?
Good.
Juan Carlos?
Yes, another one is, what are some of the life skills we need to look at with regard to helping our students grow and evolve?
Okay.
Well,
Brad, you want to take this? Yeah, go ahead.
I think that going back to what you were mentioning at the beginning, we can look at life skills in different things, because we can look at life skills as actually physical activities to be able to complete things. But then we can look at life skills like creative thinking and critical thinking and social responsibilities and digital skills, etc. I think those are the skills as far as teachers that we want to focus on. And thinking back, think about, I was watching one of the talks today, and someone was saying this, is that all of the digital skills that we as teachers are learning right now, but also your students. Your students are coming out of this so much great with these skills that we didn't even know that we needed 6 months ago. So I think focusing on, for example, at Cambridge, we have the framework for life competencies. Those are great competencies to work on that will help you with those skills. For those of you looking, if you look on our main website, Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies, those are a great set to be able to start with. But I'm seeing here, I think we're out of time, Ricardo, or unless you just want to have a wrapping comment, yeah?
Yeah, no, and just picking up from what you mentioned, and this is a final comment. Well, this shall pass, right? This shall pass, and we're gonna come out stronger from this. Those skills that you have acquired in the past few months, don't leave them abandoned, right? Integrate them into your teaching practice, whether it's back into face-to-face, or if it's still remote, or if it's a mix of both. Just keep them there, because you are becoming stronger. And that's something that your students would appreciate as well as yourselves. Thank you very much. How about you, Brad? One
final
comment.
I just want to say, just congratulations to everyone. I know this has been something we never imagined a year ago. So congratulations on everything you've achieved, and keep doing what you're doing, because it's thanks to you, thanks to every single one of you, that your students are continuing on. And this hasn't been easy. And, you know, I could lie and say everything will be fixed tomorrow. It won't be fixed tomorrow. It's still going to be some time. But keep doing what you're doing, because it's you that is making the difference. So thank you so much. The link you see on the screen here, this is to download your certificate. I know there's always questions about that. And this session will also be available it's on Facebook right now, and it'll also be available on YouTube later as well. So for those of you who are looking at a copy of the presentation. So thank you, Ricardo, for sharing this moment with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Juan Carlos. And thank you, and stay well.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.